Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work at Milton Academy, an independent boarding and day school outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. This week in the news, Julia's my co-pilot, and we continue the conversation of Mari McQuaid's blog article, 10 Application Mistakes to Avoid. Remember, Mari's a former MIT admission officer, and she reflects on why students didn't get in. If you didn't hear the first part, you'll want to go back and hear that with Vince last week. Lisa and I will answer a Speakpipe question from Hayley from Arizona, and she wants to know, when should students start their ACT or SAT prep? And Ronne Turner, the Vice Provost at WashU in St. Louis, is back. Part 2 of 3, Understanding WashU. And Lynda joins me to do a college spotlight on the University of Redlands. Julia, how are you today?
Good, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. And there's so much I want to talk to you about, but we have a lot to talk about today. So let's just dive right in.
Sure.
And you have an exciting tip for us today, so fire away.
I do. 'Tis the season for a lot of my graduated students to reach out to me and express their interest in transfer, maybe transferring from their current college to a new college. For most of the schools that my students are looking at, with a few exceptions, obviously the University of California system has a very strict schedule, and you can only apply for a transfer after you finish your sophomore year. But the majority of schools are offering a transfer process to start in the fall of next year. And a lot of those deadlines fall between February and March, some as late as April. So it might feel like, especially if you're a first year student, I just finished my first semester. I'm not even thinking about these things. But I would really encourage you, if you're curious about transfer, to maybe noodle around. There is something called the Common App for Transfer that a lot of your original schools might be on, but do not be fooled. It's sort of a landing page of sorts. You will find that the transfer process, while a little more manageable than the first year process, might have you writing the same amount of essays. You might need to write new essays if you previously applied to that school. So it can take a little while, along with securing. Usually most transfer schools will ask for at least one letter of recommendation from college. So it would be poor form on your end if you asked a professor or an advisor or a TA maybe 1 week before the deadline for transfer for one of those letters of recommendation. You should really give those folks more than a month to write. So just want you to start looking at deadlines for transfer, requirements for transfer, and looking at application platforms for transfer. If you're even considering it, it's worth it to kind of open those and noodle around.
And this is the kind of tip that we would never have done, but thank you, about 220 of you that filled out our survey and let us know that more than 30% of our listeners have a kid in college. And so when Julia shared this with me, because, I said, yeah, let's do this because we could have a parent that's listening maybe for their college kid, but maybe for their high school kid, but they also have a kid in college. I have a question for you, Julia. How do you handle it when a first year student comes to you and says, I'm not sure if I picked the right college. I'm thinking about transferring, because there's the argument of persevere, stay in there. It might get completely better sophomore year. There's, you don't want to get in the habit of like running as soon as you encounter difficult winds. But then the other side that says, look, if it's just not working, and if this is not the place for you, may as well bounce now and get on a path that's better. So how do you kind of handle that from an advising standpoint?
Great question. So usually I can suss out based on how the process went for the first year process, if a student is maybe pursuing transfer for the wrong reasons, as in I'm not satisfied with the name of the college I got into, and so I'm going to try my luck at somewhere else. If I actually know that from the get, oftentimes the student will have not given their current college a try. And so in those reasons, I can usually call it even before the student thinks about transfer or reaches out to me. You know, I ask them to make sure that they do invest as much as possible when they are in their first semester and second semester, because guess what? When you apply for transfer, you're still going to need to show A, your grades at the current college you're at, B, you're going to need someone to write for you on their behalf and also on your behalf. And also, you need to say what kind of activities you're involved with in college. And transfer applications really vary from college to college. So there's some very selective schools that have a generous transfer population, and there's some very selective schools that have room for 12 students. And so if you don't have a track record of engagement and success at your current college, even if it's not for you, you might be at a disadvantage among some of the other transfer applicants at some of those really selective transfer schools. I'll also say this, Mark, I have a lot of students that reach out to me sometimes September of their first year, October, even all the way through their first semester. And as we ready the transfer apps, they actually end up loving their school in the second semester. And so actually what students will do is, I had one student last year who never wanted to go to the school that she was going to go to as a first year student, disliked her first semester. We put together a list for transfer. We did all the apps for transfer, and she ended up only turning in one transfer app because she was really enjoying her second semester. And that was the beauty of going through the transfer process. And she ended up maybe writing a bunch of essays she didn't need to, but she didn't waste any money because she ended up not putting in those applications. She put it into the one school she was very sure would make her happier than the current situation she was in. And she did end up transferring there, but it was actually bittersweet. She was sad to leave her first choice school, and her first year school. So, and then I'll have students who might go through the whole process, and at the end of the day, elect to stay at their current college. That is a privilege, I will say, and that if you're able to use the money and time to apply to transfer schools and then not enroll, that's certainly a privilege. But if you're able to do that, sometimes I see that it's actually a useful mental health exercise for my students, just knowing they could leave if they needed to, and then choosing not to. But oftentimes I try to identify, are there compelling reasons for transfer, right? So I've had students that tried to transfer between Stanford and Harvard, or Stanford and Yale, and Harvard and Yale were like, no, like, you're a great student. You would do really well here, but there's no meaningful difference for you to come over here. So most of the time, a student's success and sort of their right values and approach to the journey rests on, are you looking for compelling reasons to transfer? Like, they don't have the major that I want to do at my current school. I've realized this is definitely too small for me. I've realized this is too big for me. I realize that I'm not a good cultural fit for the school. So compelling reasons to transfer, because if you've got a good set of grades from your current college, you're going to get your foot in the door, and then they're going to select who would this be transformative for. So I have a student right now I just talked to the other day who's at a small liberal arts college. She is sublimely happy. And then it took her about a semester and a half to realize, I'm really happy right now, but I'm not, I think I've reached the end of what I can do here and would very much like a much larger institution. So she's not applying to other small liberal arts colleges. She's applying to mid-sized to large colleges that have a robust research opportunities, for example. Now that's a compelling reason for transfer. So I try to identify, are you shopping for the right name that you feel, or do you actually really need to transfer to be able to further your personal and educational goals?
Thank you for that. When you consider that 37% of students transfer, we really don't give it a lot of time or attention. probably as much as we should here on the podcast. And you brought up something that's really important that I sometimes think people don't understand how much it comes into play. And that is, sure, schools are looking at, are you going to be a difference maker on our campus? But they're also looking at, for whom will this experience be transformational, which is one of the reasons oftentimes why some schools will prefer to take a community college kid, because they'll feel like this could be a transformational experience for them versus if you're coming from a really, really well-resourced university, is not as much of a transformational effect. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Good stuff, Julia, as always.
Thank you.
All right. Our admissions vernacular for today is articulation agreement. And that's right on point with all this talk of transferring. So an articulation agreement, it's an agreement between 2- and 4-year colleges that makes it easier to transfer your credits between them. Because what it does is it lays out very explicitly which courses count for degree credit and the grades you need in order to earn credit. So it's one of these things that can give you a lot of confidence when you're looking to know that, okay, there's a partnership, there's an agreement between this 2-year school and this 4-year school that if I go here, that my credits will actually transfer in. Now, we've done a podcast some time ago about you have to be careful that they don't just transfer in for overall credit, but then they don't fulfill department credits. That can be another sticky situation, but that's articulation agreement. And our big number today is $3.6 billion. Oh, yes, that is the number of Pell Grants dollars that were unclaimed in 2022. And the reason why they were unclaimed is because somebody never completed the FAFSA. You have to complete the FAFSA to get Pell money. Now, if there's some good news here, it was 3.75 in 2021. So 3.6 is better than 3.75. And I'm just full of all kind of numbers today, Julia. So I'm going to throw some more numbers out. So 767,000 Pell eligible seniors did not complete the application, and then meaning the FAFSA, so therefore did not receive the grant. And the average grant for Pell is this at least in 2022 was $46.86. So Pell can range in 2023 from a low of into the 700s to a high of $73.85, and it depends on your expected family contribution whether you're closer to that that 700 figure or to that 7,000. And that's just free money that you don't have to repay. It's a grant from the government. And in order to get any Pell money, your EFC has to be under 6206. So that's a 2023 number. And 41% of people did not complete a FAFSA at all last year. And so that was a total of like 1.65 million people who did not complete the FAFSA. And it's this is all research based on that NCAN, the fantastic organization NCAN, has done. So any thoughts on any of that stuff, Julia?
I had a frown face for you on that. That makes me so sad. All that free money, and there should be more of it out there, but take what you can get. And I know that that's real, the FAFSA completion, and it's been even harder in the pandemic. There's a lot of services out there that will help you complete your FAFSA, including your college's financial aid office. So please fill out those forms.
Yeah, because you have a lot of people waiting tables or whatever, and maybe they're making 8, 10, 15 an hour. But who couldn't use an extra 5, 6, 7 grand or even $3,000, depending on where you are? That's a good return on your money for the time that you put into filling out the form. So, but a lot of people just don't know this stuff, which is why as counselors, we have a job, I guess. All right. So I'm not only doing a big number, I have to do a grinding my gears episode this time, Julia. And I name names in these, and this is a school I really like, so this is painful. But Elon did something. Not only did it tick me off, it had Lisa just apoplectic, and she's a proud Elon parent. So, Julia, we've often commiserated about the sort of the strategy out there of trying to flip somebody from early action and put pressure on them to go to ED. Mm-hmm. Well, Elon went one step further. So student I'm working with, and he actually visited all these schools, mostly in the Southeast. Kind of was down to, well, his favorite two were Mercer and Elon in that order. And then Elon sends him, this is after the family's already taken a visit. It's an out-of-state kid. Elon sends him an invitation for a fly-in program. Now, this is not a diversity candidate, by the way. This is just a full-pay family. So they send him an application, like, fill this out for a fly-in program. So he fills it out. He's awarded the fly-in. He goes in, and the fly-ins do what fly-ins do. It jumps Elon ahead of Mercer to now it's his number one, and he has to go. So he applies early action. Then he gets that letter that if he flips from early action to early decision, they can give him a spot. So now the family's like, so I have to apply ED? Like, I still wanted to be able to compare, financial aid offers.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't make up their mind for the longest time. And then, you know how those letters are? They kind of imply
yes,
that if you don't do this, you might not have a spot, even that's not necessarily true, but, you don't know. So what happens? They apply ED, they get him. So it worked.
Oh.
But isn't that cold?
It's so dirty.
Isn't that dirty?
It is. I don't like that stuff at all.
That's worse than... Have you seen that before?
Not creep up to that level. No.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, because you're first of all, you were flying in a full pay family that had already visited.
Yep. I don't, that seems awfully coercive to me. And I don't know if before the DOJ came in 2017, if we would have been here.
That's
for that.
True. So for friends, if you're not following that, so there were some changes that were made giving schools more freedom to do some of these kinds of antics that were not permitted before. So that's a good point. But anyway, we call them out when they do stuff like that. That's the grinding the gears section has to rear its head every now and then.
Oof.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
So, friends, hopefully you heard last week's episode in the news with Vince, because we took this article on part 1 and today's part 2. I thought it was so important that we wanted to really do it justice. And so Mari McQuaid, she's a former admission officer at MIT, and she wrote a fantastic blog article. And basically what she did is she reflects back on what are the things besides the numbers, like besides not having the right curriculum, not having the right grades, not having the right test scores, what are the things that took an applicant and put them either in the denial bin or the waitlist deferral bin, but certainly kept them from admission? And she picked out 10 things. And what I started out last week with, if you didn't hear that, I strongly encourage you to go back and hear it with Vince, is we talked about 4. And today, Julie and I are also going to talk about 4. And then we'll just mention the last 2, but we highlighted 8 of the 10 that we think might be of greatest interest to you, our listeners. So this is technically the 5th one in her list, and her points are short enough that I'm going to read the point, and then Julia, I just want you to comment and take it where you want to go. Does that work?
Deal.
So once again, the name of the article is called 10 College Application Mistakes to Avoid by Mari McQuaid. So here we go. Number 5 in the list says, avoid TMI. My kids were always saying to me, Dad, TMI. That means too much information, right? So what she does here is she approaches TMI from 2 different lenses. So I'll read it, and then we'll have Julia give some commentary. So here's what she says. Your application is not a confessional, but rather a place to celebrate your best self. Be very careful about revealing your neurosis, your fears, your failures, your regrets, etc. This is important, unless those revelations are convincingly balanced by highlighting the positives that came out of the difficult experiences. If discussing a personal struggle or traumatic life experience, be sure to demonstrate you have come through to the other side of the tunnel. Otherwise, leave it out. So that's her first TMI point. And then I'll read the second one, and then I'll let you talk. So also, avoid the other type of TMI. Too much extra information that doesn't enhance the application. Don't send in 9 letters of rec, copies of every academic-related certificate ever earned, and a bunch of press clippings from the local paper. Admission officers have a plethora of application materials to read in a very short window of time. Be thoughtful and strategic about what extra materials you submit, especially if the school mentions a limit on certain materials in their application. Julia, take it where you want to go.
I love this point.
Isn't it good? This is one you can send to your students. You know that at Milton.
I was thinking that the whole time. I first want to give a shout out to some colleges lately have been a lot more clear about this point. Shout out to Brown, for example, who after a student applies or if a student has applied or is thinking of applying, they actually send an email saying, "Hi, thank you. We have your required materials. Please don't send us anything outside of those required materials." I appreciate that because for whatever reason, in my 15 years of doing this job, students and families do not believe me when I tell them that colleges indeed do not want extraneous information. A letter from your coach, especially if you're not a recruited athlete, is not going to change anyone's mind on if they should admit you or not. So we have a saying in our office, and I think I've said this before on the air, but it's one of my favorite stories, is when students are sort of arguing with us about, I'd like to send 2 supplemental letters of recommendation. I'd like to send an arts portfolio, but I'm not applying for an art major. And I'd like a letter and some comments from my pastor and employer and all of those things. And we say that that's too much. We say, the thicker the file, the thicker the kid. And on more than one occasion, when I said that saying to a student, they said, "What does that mean?" Which sort of proves the point. You could actually piss people off too. Excuse my language, but it's very cumbersome for admission officers who have an average of 8 minutes to read your application to try to file all that information. And I'll be honest with you, you can try to send it, but if a college isn't going to take it, the chance of them reading that extraneous information or going through it is really low. So I've seen students without any supplemental recommendations, any portfolios, anything extra certainly get into the most selective colleges. So you really don't need that. For example, Villanova only allows 1 teacher recommendation. They will not take a second one. They will not take supplemental recs. And so we have to be very clear with students that, what you've got in there has got to speak on its own. So we really discourage more of that. And as to the point about mental health and sort of also other TMI things about your neuroses, your anxieties and whatnot, colleges have come a long way when it comes to the disclosure and understanding of learning differences. They still have a very long way to come in terms of understanding mental health. As was mentioned on the podcast a little while ago, Yale, for example, got in a lot of trouble for how they were dealing with students' mental health. So the admission officers, I actually say this, and it's really sad for some of my students who have maybe had really, they're very vulnerable and they have a lot of courage through their vulnerability. But they want to disclose, hey, I had an eating disorder, or I am diagnosed as bipolar and I feel like I've got it under control and whatnot. I actually will still discourage my students from writing about that because colleges are not ready for you necessarily. It's not anything you're doing wrong. And I wish we had a different culture here. You're actually, you're embracing what I hope is the change in mental health, but colleges aren't there yet. And I can tell you for a fact, when I have a student thinking about that, I will often go to my contacts at the most selective schools and they say confidentially to me, please don't have your student do that. I won't be able to advocate for your student. So the other thing that can happen is sometimes my students are angry about something or they had what they perceive as a traumatic experience in high school. That could also be read as I'm a little angry and I'm not over things, or it could be a red flag. I had a friend in high school who actually sort of all of her friends sort of turned on her junior year, and she wrote about that when she applied to college. And I always wondered, like, even if she grew from that, is a college going to be interested in a person where 12 people just up and said, I don't really like you, I'm not going to be friends with you, right? So it is, you want to be very careful about that. And if you are going to share something about your mental health journey or whatnot, you definitely want another set of eyes on that in terms of, does this really enhance your story and say something about you that's really important for the college to know?
Yeah, both of these points are really, really, really important. And we, as counselors, we see a lot of this. For some reason, it is almost this mythology out there that you get extra bonus points for the most transparency.
Right.
And in fairness to students, you do hear them admission officers talk about be transparent, reveal something that we don't know about you. And then there's also this perception out there that unless I have had some real difficult situation in my life, then how am I going to compete with other people? So I get where the mythology comes from. But when you start getting too graphic about mental health challenges, you're introducing a risk factor. And schools, the mental health, they're overwhelmed right now. Some schools have had past experiences with things like suicide, and they're afraid of anything that even remotely concerns them like that. Or maybe they've had eating disorders spread on the dorm floor. They've had those kinds of experiences. And this is tricky because we're certainly not saying never, ever is there a place to have a overcoming story, but it has to be delicate. And you just have to be so careful going there. Most of the time, I don't see it done well. It's quite risky. But I want to be careful in how I word this, because I don't want somebody to hear that, there's never, ever a place to ever talk about any struggle that you've had. We're certainly not saying that. And as far as the too much information stuff, the other too much, like too many recommendations, literally before we jumped on the air this morning, Julia, I'm playing my phone up now to read it right now. A text from a mom whose kid got deferred at a highly selective Northeast school. And here's what it says. He's thinking of sending new grades, resume, and letter of recommendation. Do you think it will help? So that's this morning, just before we got on here, just how common it is. And it's understandable.
Yep.
People don't like the idea of just being passive. That
Right.
doesn't feel right. And a lot of times people have found that being initiators has served them well in life. And so now's the time to kick initiation into gear. But what they're not realizing is that the cumulative effect of like 10,000 people doing this and the impact that has on the admission office and the workload. And was it at Michigan, Julia, that came out with a statement? Was it last year that said sending in more stuff than we require can hurt you?
I hope so. That's a question du jour I have right now, because I must have gotten about 30 emails this weekend saying, I was deferred from Michigan. Do I send in a letter right now?
I know, we get it all the time. It's like 90% the response. What do I do? How do I take action?
Yes.
And when you say read what they said very, very, very carefully and don't do more or less, it's kind of unsatisfying.
Yes.
Onto people. And you have to read through the lines too. Like, so many schools aren't incredibly bold. Maybe they don't want to come off as insensitive, and maybe they understand, okay, maybe you're hurting a little bit. But if you read between the lines, there are a lot of schools that say little things like, we appreciate following these instructions. And really what they're saying is, it will not help you to go beyond this. Please listen to me. So I love both of these TMIs. And, and I heard a really interesting real story TMI this week. And it was from a Pitzer College representative. And he was saying, please do not go back and get recommendations from your elementary school teacher. No, this is the bad part. He said, I got one of those recently. It's not like he was just throwing that out hypothetically. He got one from the elementary school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So, be very, very careful. So that's enough. I think we talked about this one, but really want to thank Marie for that. That's a great insight. Applies to a lot of people. All right, next point. Incomplete activities list. Once again, these are reasons why an application that's got perfectly good grades, rigor, scores, grade trends leads to either a denial or a deferral or a wait list. Okay. For anyone who still thinks perfect grades and SAT scores alone will get you into highly selective college in the U.S., think again. What you do outside of the classroom, your extracurricular activities, for example, is one of the most important things that separates merely qualified applicants from desirable ones. With record high applicant rates, and record low admission rates, soft factors like activities are often deal makers today. Make sure you spend ample time on your activities list in your application. Don't forget to indicate the years of participation, calculate the number of hours per week, tell the school your role in each activity, especially if you were a leader, provide an explanation of any obscure activities. Don't leave out something that is important to you because you think the admissions committee doesn't care about your sewing hobby, for example. And finally, absolutely do not submit a resume in lieu of completing the activities list. In other words, don't say, well, I don't need to do the activities list because I'll just upload a resume. It is not a replacement. Julia, what do you want to say about this one?
I have the ultimate horror story of this very situation where I had a student. She's actually graduating a semester early from her college. She was a superstar in high school. She's a superstar in college for sure. For a particular college she applied to, she decided to submit a resume rather than fill out the activities section. And on top of that, this college used committee-based evaluation. So that meant two people were reading her application. One was scoring her completely on her sort of personal qualities, so her extracurriculars, her essays, things like that. The other person was just looking at her academics. So only one person had eyes on what she did outside of school. And since this college did not take resumes, it appeared this student didn't do anything in her activities. And when that reader got to their committee with the academic reader, while the academic reader was ready to admit, the other reader said, I'm sorry, like there's no extracurriculars here. And when I happened to be in the time where I could call the college and I could find out how our applications were reading. And that's when our rep told me, like, this student doesn't do anything, like literally nothing. And this student couldn't have been more involved at my high school. She was a leader in 1,000 things. She was always everywhere. And even if I said that to them, she didn't follow the rules and she got rejected from that school where, yes, it was a selective school. It probably could have happened anyways, but she would track with someone who was admitted or waitlisted. She did everything else that she needed to. So, and we tell this to our students all the time because they'll say, oh, some colleges ask for a resume. Should I just do that and submit everywhere? Unless the college explicitly says, I'm only taking a resume, not the activities list, then submitted a resume. But I always ask my students to please fill out the activities list fully. It's also for, I don't know if it's just my students. I have a feeling it might be a lot of high school students, but a lot of y'all, for no fault of your own, you're 17, 18, 16 years old, are a little myopic. And so something that you might do in school or outside of school requires a lot more explanation. Certainly we know soccer is a sport played with a ball, but we have something at my school that I think is really cool where we don't have a formal sexual education program. Instead, we have an elective program that's actually taught by students themselves. And they're selected, they apply, they get trained by the mental health counselors. And when they go to talk about this, they say, co-teacher for HSNR. And that's all they say. And you wouldn't know anything. What's HSNR? What does code teach me? What's the selection process? So it's really important that you explain some of those more obscure or niche sort of extracurriculars. And make sure you give yourself credit. A lot of the time I actually struggle with making sure students put down their hobbies, especially if it's like an art or you're producing things. I have a student who refurbishes antique furniture and sells it and didn't think to put that down. I was like, absolutely. Or here's a big one. If you have family responsibilities, work responsibilities, a lot of the time with my College Horizons kids, a lot of those students, they might need to haul water. That might take, 2 hours out of their every other day or something like that. So, but it doesn't seem like, oh, I'm the captain of this in my school, so I'm not going to write it down. So if you have things that meaningfully take time away from your schoolwork and or passions that are meaningful to you that you pursue, outside of just looking at Pinterest, then I would seriously consider making sure you document those things in the activities list.
Yeah, all great points, Julia. I really appreciate, how Marie, she used the example of sewing here. And a lot of times these hobbies, they add to your interesting factor. And colleges are always looking for students who are interesting and unique. And a lot of times, I'm sure you'd agree with this, Julia, it's easier to stand out with some unique thing that you do than if it's just the sort of the traditional, National Honor Society, DECA, all those clubs that people are so frequently in all the time.
Yes.
And so you want to get credit for that. And I understand we've talked about this before, but it really can add to your interesting factor. I worked with a student last year that started a jewelry selling business on Etsy. She was making about $2,000 a month selling jewelry on Etsy. And that's kind of a cool thing, like, creativity, entrepreneurship, customer service, a lot of skills there, but it adds to your interesting factor. And so that's important, and don't miss those opportunities. So good points there. All right, let's move on to her third point. It's 10 altogether, but we're doing 4 today. Another great one, the repurposed essay. Answer each essay prompt individually. And she says, applying to 10 schools while you're juggling a busy schedule can be tough, to say the least. When I read that, Julie, I thought, what about 17, not 10?
Or 44.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's tempting to try to answer the essay prompts for all 10 supplements with that one great essay that you slaved over, but be careful here. You can score low marks on the demonstrated interest test if it is obvious to the reader that you have repurposed or an essay for another school to kind of sort of fit their prompt. Admission officers tend to be familiar with the prompts from their peer institutions, so they will most likely notice and be unimpressed with your efforts. What do you say on this one, Julia?
Absolutely. This is probably my biggest point when I am in the middle of October through January, where students are now at this point completing applications for multiple schools. Often your list might have a lot of peer institutions. So something you might say about a small liberal arts college would likely track for Hamilton, Wesleyan, Amherst, Ursinus, things like that. So if you're saying, I like small classes, I like a small community, I like the fact that there's a low student-professor ratio, guess what? That's true at all the other places. And so I could likely take out the name of that college and put another one of their peer institutions in there. And oftentimes, especially when you're talking about selective college admissions, if your foot's in the door, like everything tracks, you're looking good, you're there for an admit, and then they try to figure out how are they going to admit among this strong group, they're going to look at those essays really carefully to make sure you've been authentic, you've shown your specific points about that college that are not general to other colleges. And this year especially, I don't know about you, Mark, but this question in different forms and different word count came up in a lot of colleges, which is essentially talk about a difficult conversation that you had with someone where you didn't maybe initially agree on the topic.
It was everywhere, wasn't it?
Yes, it was everywhere, but it was slightly
Everywhere.
worded different at
Yeah.
different places. And so while I let my students sort of use the same content, I was like, look at the words they're using in the prompt and make sure that you're using their language from the prompt. So Princeton isn't like, oh, you just answered the Brown essay for us, right? Like, and again, sorry to keep talking about the Ivy Leagues, but when we're talking about the most selective, they often have similar prompts that are slightly different. Maybe not to try to catch you, but maybe to make those really splitting hair decisions. So, while you might be able to recycle some content, you have to be really careful that you're making, even though it takes a lot of time. This is why a well-balanced list is important. So you don't have to do this to yourself over and over. But you really want to be very careful about how you're answering the prompt and if and when you're recycling, how you're doing so.
Yeah, and this is just a basic tip, but I'll say it. Sometimes students have a tendency to think a shorter essay is not as important as a longer one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the one time you're speaking directly to them and they're reading the same answers over and over and over again. They're human beings. It's so easy to get bored. I find the bar is really high on any college-specific question, short answer, as far as what schools are looking for you to show you've done your homework on them and show that you understand who they are and to make the case that you're a good match for their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie, I know you probably have oodles of stories from when you were at Haverford, because Haverford's always had, that why Haverford essay. I sat down in Haverford's reading process once and they were dinging people left and right for having a bad essay there.
Yep.
Can you comment on that? Like how oftentimes a bad essay there, like put somebody in either the waitlist or denial pool and kind of what that looked like and what that implication of that was?
Absolutely. I would say that actually it often came down to the supplemental essays when we were looking at our top group of who we wanted to admit from. So we would identify through our voting system or our rating system, we'd identify, okay, this many number of students got the highest votes, but guess what? We need to only select about a third of them from that number, right? So where do you split the hairs? That it was almost always on the supplemental essays and or demonstrated interest, very much in the line of what you just said, Mark, about those essays. So certainly maybe if somebody missed the mark a little bit on understanding the honor code, which is the essence of Haverford, guess what? Haverford's a small liberal arts college. Their professors live on campus. You're going to do a senior thesis. There's undergraduate research. That's actually true of pretty much all of Haverford's peer institutions. And the honor code is not. And get this, Haverford and Swarthmore look a lot alike on paper. I often think of it about like Williams and Amherst and things like that, but they're really different cultures. And that's often where we could figure out if a student was like, oh, I'm like Swarthmore, so I'm throwing in Haverford here, because their connection to the honor code and how it's articulated at Haverford, they missed the mark. And so a lot of the times we would waitlist those students because we were like, they're probably not going to come and or they're not good for this small community if they've not taken the time just yet. So it was a really easy way to, well, I was sad because some of them, I wish we could have admitted, but you let me down on your supplemental essays. And it just showed that there was no real engagement with understanding the difference between Haverford and some of the other schools. And at a small liberal arts school, demonstrated interest usually does matter because we cannot admit a high number of students. And so we're going to admit the yieldable students. And those are the students that made a good case for themselves.
Yeah, one thing I really appreciate, Marie referencing demonstrated interest here. And the reason why I appreciate it is because she worked at MIT. And oftentimes MIT has a party line that says we don't look at demonstrated interest. And I have challenged MIT, and I had a conversation with somebody who's in the admission office there now. I think it's fantastic. But it was about 8 years ago. And she said, well, we don't look at demonstrated interest. I said, hold on for a second. I said, you have your own application. Okay? You've built it into your whole system. People have to do an entire application. Then you publicly tell people if they don't interview, they have a less than 1% chance of admission historically. So you've built demonstrated interest. Now, in fairness to her, she kind of said, you got me. So she kind of admit it. They've got demonstrated interest built in. But oftentimes from the most selectives, you know this, Julia, they'll claim that they don't do demonstrated interest. And I get it that sometimes schools are defining it differently. They may mean we don't have an elaborate predictive modeling method where we come away saying you have a 78% chance versus 22% chance, and we're not paying big bucks to a firm to do the quants and crunch all that, or even use Slate has a system, and inside Slate you can do that. They may not be doing all that, but we know any school that has single choice early action is demonstrated interest. ED is demonstrated interest. And that's one of the biggest reasons for these essays, right, is to figure out who's serious about you. So I just appreciate this coming from a school that oftentimes says the party line, we don't use demonstrated interest, which I get. I mean, how many times have you heard that from MIT? I know I've heard it over and over and over again.
Right. Totally.
So I appreciate it, particularly coming from that. It's a fantastic school. I'm not trying to put them down. I'm just saying I appreciate the transparency. Okay, the last point, which is another big one, thesaurus-itis. Mm-hmm. Don't fill your essay out with $10 words when a 10-cent one will do just fine. If you have a large vocabulary, by all means, don't dumb yourself down. However, large words used improperly won't impress anyone and could be enough to turn the reader off from you altogether. The words that flow naturally will give your essays an authentic voice. And it goes without saying, authenticity in the applicant process is crucial. So what do you want to say on this one?
Absolutely. I think, and the point was made in the article, which is good. If you've got a couple typos here and there, that is not going to stand between you and being admitted. If they want to admit you, they're going to know you're human, and maybe you forgot a period at the end of one of your activities explanations if you were using periods. That's not going to be an issue. Where it is an issue is certainly when your authentic voice is not coming through. And I think a lot of students fall prey to this and think that I might come off sounding fancy, or I'll sound like a creative writer, or they end up with this kind of flowery prose that often, like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've literally had to tell students that. I've even actually sent them to an English teacher and saying, listen, if you think that I don't know what these words mean, or I don't get your craft, I send them to an English teacher. And then the English teacher is like, this actually doesn't make sense. And I know your writing voice, and I know you're capable of much clearer prose. I've some of my favorite essays, including the ones that, as we're going through the cycle right now, I'll have students who have really flawless transcripts, maybe some high test scores, and a student applies to the same school as that student who maybe has an A-B mix, maybe didn't submit test scores, but their essays were so much more authentic, even if they didn't sound as fancy as the other students. And they got in, and the really fancy student didn't, because it just didn't come off as authentic, or it came off as like missing some passion. There's a lot of overused words, like, for example, plethora, which is in this article. And it's almost like there is like a bingo scorecard that admission officers have and say like, oh, I got this this year, or I saw that word this many times this year. So it's really important to catch that. But I have seen students submit with really big typos. I had a student this year who, while she proofread her essay, once she put it in the Common App, she did not take the time to look at the preview of her Common App before submitting. And she neglected to copy and paste the entire conclusion of her Common App in there. And so luckily, had most of the schools she contacted after she caught it, about 2 days after submission, did allow her to fix it, but she probably did not get any sleep in those 2 nights, and we were lucky that the school allowed her to fix it. So it is really, really important to proofread, and especially for those words that are maybe spelled correctly but aren't the words you want to use. So my favorite at Haverford was, and I think I might have shared this before, is a student, and this is an old term, I don't think we use it anymore, but maybe this dates me a little bit, but a student talked about their experience volunteering at a hospital as a candy stripper instead of a candy striper. And certainly,
I don't think you've shared that before, Julia.
We did. I want to say we admitted that student, but you know who that student was the rest of their time? The candy stripper student. So, or another thing I see, and I don't know if we can keep this on air, but a lot of students have a burgeoning interest in public health.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of times I've seen a student write pubic health and it not come up on their word, on their spell check. Because it's spelled correctly. It's a lot. And again, I don't think you'll sleep well at night, even if it doesn't it doesn't get in the way of you being admitted, but you won't sleep well at night knowing that you did that. This is kind of a big deal. So make sure you proofread it. It's a great thing for if you trust your parents to just come in and maybe just do the editing, no judgment on the content. Sometimes it's a good job for a trusting or trustworthy editor to have, but definitely proofread.
You know, we used to, when I was doing boarding school admissions, we had a term for the thoraceitis. We called it pseudo-intellectual syndrome. We did. This kid's got pseudo-intellectual syndrome. And I let out a big guffaw when you said plethora, because every year I have kids that use that word plethora. And I say the same thing to them. I say, you may use plethora, but you will not be given the benefit of the doubt. Most admission officers aren't used to you having a conversation with them and throwing plethora out there. So you have to realize, like, if your writing vocabulary is very different from your speaking vocabulary, that's not going to come off as genuine. You're going to get perceived as pseudo-intellectual syndrome. And then sometimes I say to people, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt, so don't risk it.
Right.
All right, so we're not going to talk about our last two. We kind of touched on them. She talks about spelling, grammar, and punctuation errors, and she also talks about inadequate proofreading. We touched on those briefly as well. And so overall, just a really fantastic article, because while Marie was at MIT, one of the most selective schools in the country, all the points here really pertain to, other schools as well. And so that's great. Thank you, Julia. I think think this was a good one.
Yeah, thank you. I thought this was a really good article, so I'm glad you chose it.
Awesome. We'll see you next month.
Thanks.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
This next question is from Hayley from Arizona about when kids should start taking the SAT or the ACT for the first time.
Hi, this is Hayley from Arizona. Wondering about my student taking the SAT and or ACT for the first time. My child is in 9th grade, currently taking Algebra 2, and has consistently gotten an A all year without much real effort. Wondering if my child should start taking the SAT over the summer. High school counselor recommends that my child wait until spring of next year, which would be 10th grade, towards the end of pre-calculus class. Also, I'm wondering if there are anything else to consider when deciding when to take the test for the first time. Not just consider math, but are there other things such as English, where they are in English or where they are in science, etc. Thanks so much. Love listening.
Yeah, and Hayley has a 9th grader, and I think that's important to add to the conversation. So there are a lot of factors to consider here. One is your child up for it? Once again, because if your child's not up for it, then I wouldn't do it now, because you have plenty of time. Another thing to look at is, have they been through Algebra 2 for sure?
Right.
Because without being through Algebra 2, you're not going to do well on either test, because they have so much Algebra 2 in them. So that's something to think about. You always want to look at your calendar and see when you have time to really put some effort into this without it, throwing off your grades or all your extracurriculars and all of that, which is one of the reasons why this can be a really good summer project. Like, this could be, generally speaking, I would say if I have somebody like this, I don't see any urgency in them doing this during the 9th grade school year. I really don't. But what I would say is this: nothing is wrong with actually posting a really good score early. Like, you can get it done and be done with it. In some ways, you can make a statement, wow, look, I crushed this score at an early age. But most of the time, there's going to be some natural brain development that will occur, some maturity, even as you're just exposed to more math, more reading. You're not always likely to get your best score at that age. So what I tend to recommend for people, if they really want to do this at that age, is just take some really good practice tests.
Yeah.
Do them in real-time situation. Parents always want to know a role. You can be proctor. You can be the one to reinforce. 5 minutes left and not let them go the extra 30 seconds when they exceed their time. And this would be really more of an ACT question at this point, because the SAT is going to be digital. Or not digital. The SAT is going to be, well, I guess, digital is the term we're using.
It'll be digital, yeah.
Digital, yeah. So it's going to be, so you're really not going to be able to, well, of course, by then they'll have all kinds of ways of simulating stuff. Who knows what they'll have. But right now they don't, at least, to do that. So that's one of the things. So, but for an ACT, certainly that hasn't changed enough, at least as of now. You can do some things. But I'm big on practice tests, because a lot of the practice tests are former tests that were previously used.
Right.
And I find one of the big mistakes people make is they go take the real test when they'd be much better off doing a practice test. And there's several reasons why I don't want them to take that real test. First of all, most people don't necessarily love doing that. There's the funnest thing to do on a Saturday.
I've never heard someone say like, more testing, please.
Yeah, but you also get your answers back almost immediately. You do it in the comfort of your home. There still are some schools out there that ask you to report every time you took it.
Right. And then if you have like a low one from ninth
Correct.
grade,
Yeah. And so to me, I will always say to people, take practice tests and use the practice test as a gauge of what level you're at, and use that to help you to determine when it's time to go take a real one. Now, when I get that answer for someone that's coming like really late in the game, there's not always that opportunity, right? But for somebody it's in ninth grade, there's certainly plenty of opportunity. In general, most of the time I do not recommend ninth graders go take the real test. The only time I really would say that is if I have a ninth grader that's taking a practice and they're literally just crushing it.
Right.
If they're just crushing it, and crushing it to me is like, at least a 34 ACT, at least 34 ACT plus, then I would say, yeah, you know what? Why don't you go take a real one? And, but most of the time,
must be done.
Most of the time there's going to be improvement, even without studying a lot of times, just by reading more things and more exposure to math and stuff. So let me stop for a second, see what you're thinking over there, Lisa.
Oh, no, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think, you can do a bunch of different practice tests. You can gauge progress over time, and you're going to probably get most of the benefits that you would have gotten from taking the regular test, but, without the expense or the risk of having a poor score show up. One of the times I do see kids taking it a little younger is if they're trying to qualify for like a gifted program or a talent competition or things like that. At those points, you might see 7th, 8th, 9th graders taking those standardized tests,
that's usually more 7th and 9th for those.
Right. But I think Hayley's, son could start off with the practice test and see how it goes.
Yeah. And I will say this, and I'm not saying that, Hayley, that you think this way, but sometimes when I get questions like this, the parent sometimes I feel thinks the test counts more than it does. And, there's a saying in college admissions, and I think it's really true, that the test counts more than we say, but less than you think. And there are other things you can do with your time, even academic things. Like, I'm working with a student right now, Lisa, who basically taught themselves world history in the 9th grade and went and took the AP and got a 4. Even that they're not even taking it through their school, and now they're teaching themselves German. And even that they're a Spanish student, now they also get a tutor. They also have a tutor. It's not just completely themselves. But I think from a stamp like that's going to make a compelling story that, and once again, I'm not trying to raise people's anxieties. Like now you got to go get a 5. Next thing you know, you have to get a 5 when you're 11 on the world AP again, right? So
I'm going to sign up Thomas next week,
yeah,
for the AP World History.
That's something Lisa would do, by the way. The high achievers over here, but
that
and he's also a smart kid too.
But he just he'll watch all these history YouTube cartoon videos. And so he actually knows a lot, but I don't know if he knows enough to do well on the AP test,
But he's a pretty special kid. Grade. So I joke around. That's that's kind of thing you would do, but he is the kind of kid that would do well at this at an early age. He's always had interest in this stuff. And I'm kind of amazed because I wasn't that way at his age, but so
me neither.
That's just something to think about. Like, what if you're, the SAT is not ACT. It's not all that. You do have time. Like, I understand why that person gave the advice of looking to do it more toward the spring of 10th. Because most of the time you're not going to get you're not going to get a better score in 9th and 10th usually. And
right.
You really can take, I don't recommend people take it in 12th. I like people to get the test done before the latest, either the June, July, or August administration of their rising 12th grade year, get it done with and not take it into the senior year. But if you even work with that calendar, that's more than 2 years from now if somebody's in 9th. So you have almost 2.5 years to nail your score. And once again, a lot of people are taking it into the senior year. I don't recommend that. So, the most important thing now is if you have somebody willing to do this, it is a good way to get an assessment of where you're weak and where you're strong. It's a very valid thing to take the test as an assessment. Is it more reading comprehension stuff? Is it certain, is it geometry? The ACT is 25% geometry, Not your strongest math,
Sorry,
Lisa.
I'm having some flashbacks.
Yeah, I
don't know my right from my left. So you can imagine rotating things. It's just bad. It's all bad. So
yeah, geometry is one of those weird maths that someone can be really good at math, and then geometry is just a whole completely different type of brain thinking, and they can just really struggle. I remember when I was at boarding school, we would have some kids that just could not get through geometry. They'd have to, it had something like math disability. In some cases, they had to transfer to different schools.
Yeah.
But can be a really good way to get an assessment of where you're strong, where you're weak, what needs to improve. I think that's something that could actually serve quite a few people well. If no need to obsess, but just take this test and let's kind of see where your skills maybe need some bolstering.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely think the SAT, we don't know what that's going to look like for the student. And so I don't know. I guess I would do it more with the ACT.
It's going to be difficult to simulate. I mean, I know some of the test prep orgs are working on some things. Obviously, that's their job to come up with stuff. So who knows where they'll be at pretty soon in terms of having created systems. I'm hearing some optimism from some of them. They think they've got some good systems to mirror what's going to go on, but it's still, I agree, it's a total unknown for right now. But I'm not opposed to a student taking it, not an official. I would not be saying official, but taking a practice one at home as a self-assessment tool. But this to me should not be your new extracurricular activity. This should this should not even be something you're doing every 3 months.
No.
But if somebody wants to do one, around spring of 9 to kind of see from home, to sort of see where, their skills are at. But I personally like to recommend people start looking at doing the test at the end of the 10th grade. You're through school. Yeah. And if you're the kind of student that can do well, then you probably have APs in 10th, at least a couple if you're at a school with APs. And so I'd rather you use your April and May to focus on your APs. And then once you get through the school year, if you're really strong, nail that thing in the June, July, or August administration of your rising 11th and be done with it. If you're like most people, maybe you take your first test then, and then maybe you end up really nailing your score in June, sometime in junior year or even summer. of the rising senior year.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anything else on that one? Or do you think we wrapped it up?
I have a small embarrassing story about myself. So, my family, like my father was an early adopter of technology. So we had like a computer a lot before other people did. And so one of the things that he got was this SAT prep program for my brother who was 2 years older. It had it was on those floppy disks, and so
Wow.
my brother was not so fond of it, but that was like my extracurricular. I would go home and I'd be like, I want to beat my score on the last
No
test.
wonder you got into Chicago.
I loved it. Like, it was fun for me. It was like a game.
And I remember you said you did well on that test too. So there you go. It worked.
But yeah, so it was probably like the very first computerized test prep ever. They were talking.
Yeah, because I'm thinking I'm looking at when you told me that, I was like, all I remember were some books back then.
No, there was a computer program, and Then I would also play like Space Invaders afterwards. So I mean, I balanced it out. But
good for you, good for you. Well, that was a story worth telling. Good stuff, and hopefully this was helpful for all listeners.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, last week you heard the first part of our interview. Now it's time for the second part. So speaking of another school, talk to us about the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts.
Well, the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts, it's our smallest program, and it has programs like architecture, studio art, communication design, fashion design, which is really interesting to be at a highly selective institution that has biomedical engineering and fashion design.
Yes.
And so, for those students who love the arts and love architecture and they want to major in that and have careers in that area, it's a wonderful, wonderful school. But at the same time, the students who are in Sam Fox are also taking courses in other areas, liberal arts areas as well. And then often students who are really talented have more than one interest, and many years they've been developing that artistic side of their brain, and they want to continue to take courses and do some things. And you can minor in Sam Fox. So again, there's a lot of flexibility at WashU. For art students, we require a portfolio. It's optional and encouraged for architecture students. We just recently had an undergraduate dean who has worked at WashU for over 30 years. She just recently retired. And when I first got here, we were talking about it. And I said, boy, I would love to take an art class, but I can't draw. She said, we can teach you how to do that. So it's an open program, and I really like that. The other thing is we've got a museum on campus. The Sam Fox School also benefited from our East End development project, and they have some new buildings and studio space for students. There's art all over the campus, and so it's a really great place if you want to study design and visual arts.
No, I've had students in every one of your schools, and the last one is the College of Arts and Science. I know that's usually the biggest school at most campuses. What do you want to share about this one?
Well, you are right. The College of Arts and Sciences is our largest division, home to the liberal arts tradition at WashU. So for those students who are interested in natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, this is the place that you want to go. But we also have programs that are at the intersections of different fields in the College of Arts. One of the most popular programs is called PNP, Philosophy, Neuroscience, and Psychology. They're joint majors like math.
I have two students in that right now.
Do you have two students in PNP?
Yes.
Are they enjoying it?
Yes.
Good. We have a lot of students who are interested in pre-med, but want that, they're interested in the brain and psychology, and so they'll choose PNP. So it's a great program. But we have joint programs like math and economics and computer science. So it's really cool. But the other thing about arts and sciences that I want to mention is that we have some unique first year programs. They're typically smaller one semester or even multi-semester programs that can involve field work, research, international travel, and they're very popular. It's a way to help first-year students transition and studying things that they're interested in and that will apply to their degree program, but you get these smaller seminar deep dive topics that our students really, really love. A lot of breadth and depth in the College of Arts and Sciences. They love students who are interested in the intersection of two disciplines. So we take that ampersand in arts and sciences really, really seriously. So they love students that want to explore and do and study in different fields.
And I know you're admitting students directly into a college and reading the application sort of with the college they have in mind. So a couple questions. What's your advice for undecideds when they're not sure what college to pick? And then secondly, how do you guard against people just selecting the college with the highest admit rate? Because I don't know if you still do this, but I know it wasn't too long ago I saw where you did publish your admit rates per college. So that stuff I know is publicly available.
Well, we no longer publish admit rates by the academic divisions, but we're pretty upfront with helping students understand possibilities and options. Arts and Science is the largest program. We have a lot more flexibility in Arts and Sciences. Business is it's a small business program, and they're serving a smaller group of students. So, we help students think about where they're applying, and we're upfront about that. But what we don't want is we don't want students to apply to someplace because they think it'll be easier to get into that particular major. We ask students to apply to where they want to be. As you recall, I said students can't change their major until after the first semester, which is something that we do to try to help students understand that it's important for them to pick what they're interested in studying. So the advice that I give to students is, if you know what you're interested in, apply to that. If you are truly undecided and you have no idea what you're interested in studying, I tell them to apply to Arts and Sciences. If the student is interested in engineering, but they're just not sure which discipline of engineering, apply to engineering. And you'll work with the academic advisors in engineering to do that. I'm going to say that again. I tell students to apply to engineering if they love engineering, but they're not sure which discipline, and then they can work with the academic advisors within the College of Engineering to figure out what discipline of engineering that they want. Students don't have to choose a major until the end of their sophomore year here at WashU. So you do have some time if you are undecided. And one of the things that I did not say earlier about WashU is known for its great advising. We are a medium-sized institution, but we act more like a small institution when it comes to advising and supporting students. So students get a lot of one-on-one support, a lot of one-on-one advice, so that they can understand and figure out their path.
So are you admitting to major for some majors as opposed to admit to college? Are there some particular majors where you're actually looking at the major as opposed to the college?
Well, there are some majors where the deans of the divisions will say, hey, it would be really great if we had more mechanical engineers or more electrical engineers because computer science is getting so large. Or our humanities faculty are always interested in more students who are interested in the humanities fields. But beyond that, we're just admitting into the division.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
This week's recommended resource is Khan Academy, which we've talked about on the podcast, but somehow it's never made it to our official list of resources. Khan Academy is a free online learning platform started by Sal Khan in 2006. Khan Academy has partnered with a college board to provide test prep for the SAT and PSAT. Students receive a personalized program based on the results of their diagnostics and practice tests. When students register for official SAT prep, they'll get reminders to set a practice schedule, and then 2 weeks prior to the actual test date, a reminder to take a full practice test so they can simulate the actual testing experience. They also provide test prep for many of the AP exams like Calculus AB and BC, U.S. History, Biology, Chemistry, Art History, Stats, Macro and Microeconomics, Computer Science Principles, Physics, and Environmental Science. Khan Academy has a broad spectrum of content for students ranging all the way from primary school through high school. And because it's online, students work through the programs on their own schedule, and there is no cost for any of their programs. You can explore all their offerings at khanacademy.org.
Let's talk about St. Louis in particular. What's it? Fox Hill? Is that the area the school's in? The particular areas of St. Louis where you're located?
Well, if I'm not aware of that, I don't think there's a Fox Hill. If
No,
there
I'm
is.
saying the wrong name. I was trying to go by memory, and I knew I was messing up. There's a section of the city that, if you don't know it, then you know I got it wrong. I was going back to 2015, got me on that. But let's just, whatever you call it, the section of the city where you're located.
Well, it's really interesting because our campus is located just at the edge of the city of St. Louis, and we're kind of we're in this. A part of us is in the city, a part of the campus is in the county, in two communities. One is called University City, and the other is Clayton. So it's really interesting that we're in these three municipalities. And Clayton is sort of the county's business district, and University City is really a residential area. We are 7 miles from downtown St. Louis. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about St. Louis. It is a great city. You have the benefits of being in a large metropolitan area without the hassles. Traffic is usually great. It takes 15 to 20 minutes to get any place. We include Southern Illinois when we talk about the metropolitan area because Illinois is right across the river. WashU, our campus itself, I've told you the communities that we're in, but right across the street from WashU is Forest Park, which...
That's what I was trying to say. Forest Park, I had the F part right. Forest Park, Fox Hill, close.
Okay, very close. But Forest Park is a beautiful park. It was recently named one of the best city parks by USA Today. It's 1,300 acres. There's lots of free attractions, including a zoo, an ice skating rink, museums, an outdoor amphitheater. There's also Del Mar Loop, which is a 5-minute walk from us, where students spend a lot of time eating. There are great eclectic shops and ethnic restaurants and theaters and those sorts of things. I love St. Louis because things are accessible. You can get tickets to concerts and to touring Broadway shows. And we've got athletics. We've got the Cardinals, our baseball team. We have the Blues, if you're interested in hockey. And we have a new MLS team, the St. Louis City SC, and we're really excited. There's a new stadium that's just been built across from Union Station, and it's really cool, and we can't wait for more soccer.
Nice. And you still have that trolley? You gave all counselors a ride on that trolley, which I really liked.
The trolley on Del Mar?
Yes.
It is off and on. Right now, I think it's a little bit off.
Okay. I hear you. So I want to go back because, you did highlight the commitment to diversity, the commitment to increasing access to under-resourced students. But I think that was not always the case. And the economist Raj Chetty, when he did his study and got access to 20 million tax returns some years ago, WashU at the time had the largest ratio between the 1%ers and the bottom 60%. It was like 3 times more kids in the top 1% than the bottom 60. Now, I just watching and observed have seen a lot of changes that you've made, like you were doing free apps and you were doing great financial aid, even greater financial aid for students under certain incomes. And I know you did like a partnership with KIPP and fly-in programs. And I've just seen a real commitment. And I've seen your Pell Grant numbers go up maybe from like 7% to 20%, if I remember, close to that. You can correct me. But so tell me what happened there, because clearly there's been a transformation to be more committed to attracting students of all incomes compared to maybe what had happened historically. So there has to be a story there.
Well, you're right. When WashU, the leadership of the institution at the time, realized where we were and what we were doing, they made a decision and had the support of our full board of trustees that we were going to intentionally work on creating a more diverse undergraduate student body. And when we talk about diversity, we're talking about all aspects of the word. And so this has been an effort that we've been working on over the years. That was one of the reasons why I came to WashU, because they were so committed to this effort. And so some things have happened recently. You mentioned this earlier, but we had a great return. And so the university was able to announce the Gateway to Success program, which was a $1 billion investment in financial assistance. And that allowed us to move to be a need blind institution. We were one of the only institutions in our peer set that was not need blind. So we're excited that we are now need blind for domestic first year students. And that means that our admission decision is really based on the student's abilities and not on their ability to pay. Our chancellor in his inaugural address created a new program called the WashU Pledge, which offers a full cost scholarship, including startup grant for computer and other personal items to students who gain admission to WashU who live in Missouri or Southern Illinois and who are Pell eligible or come from families who make $75K or less a year. So that's one of the programs that we implemented. I mentioned as part of that, the startup grants. We do that if you're Pell eligible, wherever you come from, or you come from a family that makes $75K or less. We give you money to get yourself to WashU, to get a computer if you need it, to purchase a coat if you're coming from a warmer climate, to help you purchase your books. We will waive the summer earning expectation for those students. So, we've implemented a number of programs. I mentioned earlier that we have a new effort for rural students. It's called the Heartland Initiative. And one of our community members gave us a donation, and we're able to hire a couple of additional staff, and we will host a 1-week on-campus experience for students from rural regions, particularly in Missouri and Southern Illinois. So there's just a lot of things that the institution is doing. And we're working on bringing students to the university. And our financial aid philosophy supports that. We meet 100% of demonstrated need for all students. But we also have efforts on campus through our our Division of Student Affairs, as well as the Provost Office, our Academic Affairs Office of Student Success. So we've done a lot to ensure that our students who are coming from limited resource backgrounds have an equitable experience, or an experience that's on par with students who may be coming from well-resourced backgrounds. So there's a lot of new programs that are supporting students and helping students to be successful, particularly if they are first generation and have not had the exposure that other students may have had. So there's a deep commitment. And our Chancellor Martin, he talks about wanting to make WashU the place where first generation students who are limited income, where they not only can be admitted and enroll and be successful. He wants them to thrive. He wants us to be the best place in the country for those students. And so that's what we're working towards.
I love it. I love it. I didn't know that you'd gotten rid of the summer earnings component. So for those of you who don't know, schools that require the CSS profile, most of them, overwhelming majority, they build in a student summer work component into the financial model. And, it can be a disadvantage for under-resourced students. And, they may want to do something to get ahead, volunteerism toward their career, internships if they're unpaid, and now they have this additional money that gets added to what they have to pay. And so that's one of the things that some of the wealthier schools that are more committed to access and equity have done. But it's a short number. There's not very many schools doing that. So I love that long list of things that you shared that you're doing. It's an example of how you have to, schools change, and the WashU of 10 years ago is very different even from today. So, and I'm sure you have a big part because you came in 2016. So you've had enough time to put your fingerprints on some of these things, Ronne. So that's great.
Well, we are all working to, it's so important for students to have an education that exposes them to students from all types of backgrounds. That's an important part, in my view, and I think of our institution's view of the educational experience. There are some really tricky challenges that we have to solve in society, and you can solve those much better when there are people with different perspectives and different backgrounds attacking that problem. And so that diversity is really important, and we're working on it and just continuing to do our best.
Awesome. Let's transition a little bit more to admissions. So when you're making an admission decision, what role does the high school the student is coming from play in how students are assessed?
Well, we, like most of our peers that are highly selective, we take a holistic approach to the application review process, which means that we are looking at every single thing that student submits, but we're looking at it within the context of the opportunities and the experiences that student has had. And that's how we look at high schools. We're looking at each high school to understand the curricular opportunities that are there, and we are evaluating students within the context of what is available for them. We know that a lot of schools can offer honors level and IB and AP courses. And we also know that there are schools that don't have that ability. And so we're not penalizing a student if they come from a school that doesn't have that ability. We're looking to see how well they've done within their context.
Friends, this concludes the second part of what is a 3-part interview. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Lynda, anything new in St. Louis?
The sun is shining. I'm happy here in the Midwest.
That's good. We need someone representing the Midwest since, we have Dave, but he's in the heart of the city. We need someone. You're Metro St. Louis, like Metro with a very broad metro, right? on the cusp of being rural.
That is very fair. I'm yes, very fair.
There we go. Well, good for you. Good for you. Well, I am incredibly excited today to talk about the University of Redlands, and I'll start by saying this. A lot of people will say to me, "When are you going to write another book?" And my answer is pretty much the same. I'm not. That's the answer. I'm still burned out from the last one. That's kind of my answer. But, in preparing the spotlight, I really said to myself, maybe I have another book in me. And that book would be something like Hidden Gems. And it would identify these incredible schools that fly under the radar that most people haven't heard of. And I can assure you, if I ever write that book, I could write that book and there might be 10 schools in that book. This school will be one of them. I'm incredibly impressed. And it's one of the reasons why I took this trip. I mentioned a few times that I've been to the Claremonts 4 times since 2012. Well, there are 2 schools on this trip I hadn't seen, and that was really the biggest impetus for me doing it, Caltech and Redlands. And I have so much to say that this is going to have to be a 2-parter because, like with Caltech, That one went 35 minutes, and I don't want to run a 35-minute episode in a 4-parter with all the other stuff we're doing. So we'll do part 1 now, part 2. That will give me the liberty to really do the deep dive I want to do. So, let me start by saying this. So we arrived at the bus, and we got off, and it's like we arrived almost like to paparazzi or something. So they had 50 students lined up, cheerleaders, and they just went crazy with this big cheer. And, 2 thoughts went through my mind. One was, that's kind of nice. It's like a nice feeling to get that. And the second was, well, this is clever marketing on the part of the school. But I've found out very quickly that that's just who they are. That wasn't some gimmick. That's the culture of who they are. So a little bit about Redlands. They're 63 miles straight east of LA, right near San Bernardino. It's a town that was settled by both East Coast and Chicago residents who were seeking better weather. Dave, got you there. And one of the things they did, which was really incredible, they gave us a bus tour with a historian for an hour and a half into the city of Redlands. But he wasn't just any historian. He's like a trustee of the college, a graduate of the college, been there forever, in his 70s. He was funny, but he was knowledgeable too. And one of the things he shared is, I don't think there's another school in the country that he knows of where the history of the school is so intertwined with the town. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. But Redlands has 72,000 people. It has a historic art district. It's 30% Latinx, of which 90% would be Mexican Americans who settled during the Revolution. So this area was once a part of Mexico. So it also has a very rich tradition of students coming from Hawaii. Now, I'm going to jump to a couple of things that our tour guide said, and then I'll fill them out a little bit later. So I asked the tour guide, why come to Redlands? And the first thing he said was the campus. And then he said the business program, the professors are amazing, the Johnston program, and study abroad. I'll say more about all of those in a second. But I kid you not, I'm not just saying this because I'm talking about Redlands. The hardest thing in the world for me to do would be to rank the most beautiful college campuses I've ever visited. I've been to more than 400. But if I had to pick a number one, this is my new number one.
Really?
Yeah, that's how incredible the beauty is. It is just striking. I mean, just because like the views of the mountains coupled with the palm trees, coupled with the architecture. And listen, there's so many amazing, beautiful schools, including, WashU that's on this episode. I mean, that place is striking. And boy, you can go to Malibu and talk about Pepperdine. You can go over to Duke's West Campus. There's beautiful schools in Florida like St. Leo and Nova, and even other schools in California. I mean, there's just so many gorgeous. And then where I was this summer, CU Boulder. I think they belong in that conversation. And beauty definitely is in the eye of the beholder. But for everybody that was on the trip, all of us, we were like gobsmacked by how striking the beauty is. And that's one of the things that does stand out about this place. Let's get more into the mission. So they've reworked their mission and their vision recently. And I love them because they're really succinct. And I love really succinct visions and missions. Because I know how much work goes into picking every single word. And I also like it because I really feel like every single thing that I see here, I felt in the 5 hours we were there. So the mission, we welcome, educate, and empower a diverse community of learners for lives of meaning, impact, and joy. And the vision, now this is interesting because the vision is future, right? So they say by 2032. This is where the University of Redlands will lead California in providing a student-focused, personalized education that drives student success. And every one of those things to me is so rich, and I'll comment on all of those things: the student-focused, the personalized, the student success. So I see all of them there. And then some of their core values, which are also really important. I think the last time I talked about when you're looking at a school, you want to look at the history, you want to look at the mission, the vision, and the location, because all those things shape a school. But you also want to look at the core values. And so their core values, excellence, We strive to do our best in all we pursue with empowerment of our students through scholarship and skills. Exploration, we pursue a better understanding and appreciation of ourselves and the world through academic inquiry, research, experiential learning, and collegial discourse. All these things are things that they do. And inclusivity. And I think as I explain it more, you'll see all these things. We seek different perspectives, experiences, cultures, backgrounds, abilities, talents, contributions that comprise a global society. And we work to build strong, multidimensional, sustainable community. And then justice, we promote fairness, integrity, liberty, equity in our thoughts, service, actions to lead our local communities in the world. And I'll tell you one thing that impressed me about Redlands. When we were on these trips, we get to meet and hear from the presidents. And for those of you just listening, I'm for the first time, I'm recapping a 9-school visit trip that I had in December to Southern California. And so this is school 7 of the 9. So we get to meet student presidents on all of these places. And I was the most impressed with the president of Redlands. So Krista Newkirk is her name. And she actually just came in July of 2021. So she's just really, about to come up to the end of her second year. But she told the story of like how she came to Redlands. And she's like really one of these in-demand people based on her past track record, what she's done other places. So he's talking about the search firm that reached out to her, and she was like, please, not another school. Like, no. And then they said, no, this place is special. You need to go take a look. This is a hidden gem. And then when she visited, she was blown away. And I really want to mention her because visionary leadership can really take a place far. And I think it's a huge plus to the school that they have such an incredible visionary leader. And later, I'll already talk about some of the things that she's implementing. So some of the things that I said are borne out. This school just made a real clear, affirmative, anti-racist commitment. They spent time wordsmithing it. I'll just read some of the key points from it. Faculty Administration Board of Trustees will recognize that racism is pervasive in our society. No segment of our nation is exempt, including the university. We acknowledge that students, alumni, and employees, especially those who are Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, have experienced and have been hurt by marginalization, silencing, tokenism, erasure, and damaging practices. We recognize that we have not adequately confronted inequities stemming from race and intersection of other social identities. We unconditionally reject racism in all forms and embrace institutional change necessary to dismantle these systems. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they're unapologetically committed to it, so much so that the president implemented a new thing that all 39 members of the Board of Trustees and the cabinet have to go through training on this as part in order to just continue to serve on the board. So that just kind of tells you a little bit about sort of their commitment to equity and justice. Now, in 2021, they became an HSI, and our regular listeners may not know what that is. It's an Hispanic Serving Institution. And so the school has seen a real surge in their Latinx community. They have gone in the last 15 years from 15% to 40%. And so they are now a majority minorities institution. And they have other core values as well. One of them is kindness. And that is we foster a community that is friendly, considerate, respectful, and empathetic as we share and shape citizens who understand their actions and words have impact. And then service. Through selfless acts, we contribute to the health, wellness of others. And I read all those because as I go into describing more and more and more about this school, I think people are going to see that this is not talk. They walk the walk. I mean, when I'm reading these things, like this is what I experienced in my 5 hours on this campus. So a little bit more. The campus is 160 acres, obviously right near Redlands, the town, but certainly set apart. It doesn't feel urban at all. It feels like a distinct campus that's set apart from the city. And if you're afraid of earthquakes, this may not be the place for you because it's right by the San Andreas Fault. They pointed out right where the San Andreas Fault is. Now, one thing that's important to know that it's currently a secular institution, but it was founded for American Baptists. So the founders looked around and they said, USC is the Methodist school. So the Methodists were at USC. Occidental, founded by Presbyterians. That's Presbyterian school. The Nazarenes, Point Loma down in San Diego. The Congregationalists, they were at Pomona. That's the group who founded Pomona. Then the Quakers, they were at Whittier. And they're like, where were the Baptists? So that was a little bit part of the origin. Opened their doors in 1910. And by 1912, they were experiencing chaos because a major cold wave came through and wiped out the California citrus crop. Yet, one thing you have to know about this area, it is right smack dab in the heart of citrus country. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And so they also experienced hard times again. The Great Depression hit them really hard. So did World War II, hit them really, really hard. But then the 40s brought about a lot of changes, and including the onset of the war and conscription and enlistments, depleted classes. Courses were set up for soldiers. But then the passage of the GI Bill, that really is what sort of was a springboard for them by the special action of Congress. And before long, there were 50 veteran families staying on campus in a place that began to be known as Vets Village. And when you look at their class of 1949, they had 219 graduates, and more than half were veterans as recently as 1949. So a couple of things I want to talk about because they have some really, really distinctive and incredible programs. And I kind of want to just go through them. And that's one thing that really stood out to me about the school was its distinctive and really unique programs. Now, most of the people are going to be in the College of Arts and Sciences, CAS, where they have 2,200 students and 100 graduate students from 41 states and 28 countries. But the first program I have to talk about that's really distinctive, and this would be their most distinctive program, so let's lead with it, although they have many, is their Johnston Center for Integrative Studies. And we got to meet with the Johnston leader. So this is a really, really cool program. It's a design your own major, design your own curriculum program, but it's also a learning living community where you live together. 200 students are part of the program, so about 9% of the school. They bring about 30 to 40 in as first years, and about 10 will transfer in at the end of their sophomore year. And faculty live there with you. Faculty have their offices there. So it's a whole community. And it was born in the midst of the experiential education movement. It's now an endowed college. It began as an experiment. Let's try a professor-student mentoring relationship that's student-initiated and contract-driven and see what we can come up with. And so now it's grown into this College of Arts and Sciences as the Johnson Center for Individualized Studies. And then it was renamed in 1990 as the Johnson Center for Integrative Studies. So how does it work? Well, first of all, you have to apply. But the good news is it's not one of these things that you have to apply and it's like ridiculously hard to get in. It's more like it's just for people that really want to do something creative and shape their own education. So they have all kinds of things. Our tour guide shared one of his friends focused on the psychology of dance. Like you design your own courses. So what happens is your first year, you're meeting with your faculty advisor, very carefully, closely laying out for you all of the options in the curriculum. And they want you to explore and just experiment with all the things that the curriculum has to offer. So you get familiar with it. They say there's two people that are really drawn to Johnston. One, people that just want to do something incredibly creative with their education. And other people are ones who really not really sure what they want to study. So who's drawn to this? Well, two types of students, they say. One, people are really not sure what they want to study. And rather than dive into something to find out that they don't know, go through this very intense counseling process where you're working with an academic advisor to explore the curriculum for all of year one. And then in your second year, you come in and you create a plan of action. And even you come up with a degree title. So the leader of the center said a couple recently are molecular biology and physics or the chemistry of art. And then you work on devising your classes. And then at the end, you have to present your idea to a faculty committee who will then give you recommendations about how they want it tweaked, and then they'll approve the degree plan. So there are really no GEs built in. There are 2 dorms exclusively for Johnson students. And then one of the real exciting parts about Johnson is it's all narrative evaluation. It's not grades. So at the very end, there's this huge celebration with they didn't use the term capstone, but you present your narrative research. And this is this big giant event where parents are there, everybody's there, everybody celebrates. In fact, you can tell the impact of this because they're coming up for their 55th year, and they're expecting to have 1,000 people come back.
Wow.
To all celebrate their Johnson experience. And so it wouldn't be that big of a deal if it wasn't something that's really impactful. So I'm going to toss it to you and see what's percolating in your mind, mostly because I'm tired of hearing my voice over here. Lynda, any thoughts?
A couple of things. I love the mission statement and the values, and especially when you put a date on something for a goal, because then you have something to work towards. So I like hearing that. For the Johnston Center, there are a lot of schools out there that let you devise your own major, but it seems kind of the exception. Whereas Redlands, with that Johnston Center, they have a roadmap in place and all of the support. And I love that for students who kind of want to explore something a little bit different. And the fact that it's integrative studies, so you're talking about different programs coming together. I think it's a really unique program with amazing supports.
And I'm really glad you emphasized the integrative studies, because it really is interdisciplinary. Like when they went through and they shared the different things people did, sure, there was a unique theme that they had and a passion area, but it was combining the philosophy with the chemistry, with the data science, with the social science, with the social sociology. It was really integrative that way. So I'm glad you emphasized that. So let's talk about some other great programs they have, because that's not the only one. This is an incredible place to go if you're serious about music. So this is a music conservatory. Now, formerly was a school of music, and very recently, like 2022, they've now merged the conservatory with the School of Theater and Dance. So now it's the School of Performing Arts is now aligned with the Department of Theater and Dance. But this has been, long accredited as by the National Association of School of Music, about 350 students. That's quite a bit when you think about this as a school of 2,200. So you're talking about 1 in 6 students are there to study music, with 13 full-time and 26 adjunct faculty. They offer the Bachelor's of Music, degrees in composition, performance, and education. Bachelor of Art, degrees in music. They have a Master's of Music. I always tell people, when you see a master's degree, you have to know that the school has to have a strong faculty, and they're attracting real serious students. Another really nice thing is that any student can participate in the music programs. One, you can become a music minor, but you can also take music electives. Now a lot of times it's done by audition, but there's opportunities in the university choir, in the chapel singers, in I don't know if I'm saying this right.
Madrigals?
Madrigals. See my knowledge. Thank you there. So embarrassing. The Wind Ensemble. They have a concert band. They have a studio jazz band. They have a symphony orchestra. They have a chamber orchestra and the university opera. And they perform a variety of chamber music ensembles. And of course, all kinds of opportunities for, private group, class lessons for instrument, voice, you name it. And so pretty spectacular for the musician there. And they really prided themselves on allowing more non-music majors to take part in some of these opportunities, more so than some other conservatories offer.
Nice.
Which could be really great for the person that really, really likes music, but maybe you're not proficient. All right, they've got another spectacular program that's booming, and this is their Center for Spatial Studies. So this has been booming. In fact, the director of studies said, she was very honest with us. She said, there's so much interest in this that she's being really pressured into making it into a major. This is also cross-disciplinary, and I'm going to talk more about this in a sec, but one of the other great things about Redlands, they have a lot of these 4+1 programs. And what that means is you get a bachelor's in 4 years, and then you get your master's in 5. And so they have a master's a program in GIS. And so I actually didn't know that much about GIS. You're kind of the techie, so you might have known more about this, Lynda, but they have all kinds of pathways and internships and employments in the geospatial industry. Esri, which is, I did, learned a little bit about Esri. Esri's like behind all those maps. When Johns Hopkins was showing those maps of COVID, all that is done with Esri. So that's private, government, and non-government organizations. And they've got like incredible job placements into this. So this is students that want to study geography, spatial technologies, and they want to use, GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. So this relates to geodesign, data science, visualization, remote sensing. I mean, this is a booming field, and they actually offer 2 different master's degrees in this field, and they offer the minor undergraduate, and this is like hot and booming, and they're clearly investing resources there. This is another reason why people pick the school and choose the school.
It is fabulous. And if you look at the Redlands website, they call themselves a spatial university because they have such a focus on that GIS program. I won't be surprised if they come up with an undergraduate degree in the near future, just because it seems like they're really invested. And that GIS field of study is such a we talk about the integrative, interdisciplinary and kind of view because it's STEM, but you couple it with that liberal arts, like you were talking about with the Johns Hopkins and where's COVID, but you can use that for where should we be building, libraries or hospitals or stores or wildlife conservation. So GIS is the tool, and you couple it with the Y of the liberal arts studies. It's a fabulous field for students who are looking maybe for a combination kind of field. So kudos to Redlands for that investment in this program.
I knew you would know more about it than me, so thanks for sharing that. Lynda's a techie on our team. Friends, this completes the first half. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Monday's episode, of course, we'll scour the world of higher ed and let you know any updates that we think would be relevant to you as our listeners. And we'll answer a question from Courtney, who sent in a great question asking us about why the College Board has so many fees. And Susan will actually join me for that. Susan wouldn't share this with you, but I will. She's a College Board expert, and so I wanted to get her insights on that question. And then we'll continue our interview with Kirby McKillier, looking at how students should pick a major or a career. That'll be part 2 of 3. And I closed out with another quote, doing Black History quotes from the month of February. And this is a quote from another person who I hold in really high regard. He was my congressman until he recently passed away. And that was the late, great John Lewis, who passed just really probably about 18 months ago. And this is a famous quote from him, and I love it. I alluded to it last week when I gave the Frederick Douglass quote, and here it is. Speak up, speak out, get in the way, get in good trouble, necessary trouble. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.